This is Ham Radio Perspectives. I'm Quin, K8QS.
I'm Tom, WA9TDD.
All right, Tom, we're going to talk about preamps here, especially preamps for HF, but not exclusively HF. But I want to open with a story. I was on 17-meter sideband the other day working a guy, and he said, well, you're only running about 5'7" here. Let me put on my preamp. He puts his preamp in, and he says, yeah, you're definitely 5'9". This guy doesn't know what a preamp is. He's giving me a signal report based on what his preamp is telling me. And so I started thinking, you and I ought to do short little video here on what preamps are, what they're good for. At its core, really, a preamp or preamplifier, it's an electronic amplifier designed to boost very weak radio frequency RF signals that are captured at your antenna before they're fed into the rest of your transceiver's circuitry, like mixers and filters and all that. So you give a little boost of that signal coming in. While it sounds like something you'd want to have on all the time. In fact, why do we even have preamps? Let's just put all those preamps on there and leave them on all the time and don't even need preamp buttons. But actually, it has a certain utility to it, a time and place and conditions to use a preamp that are best. So we're going to go through this a little bit, a breakdown of what a preamp actually does and strategically when it helps and hurts your operations.
Yeah, well, the core function of a preamp is to overcome the noise figure. Every piece of electronic equipment generates a small amount of internal electrical noise. The amount of noise a receiver adds to the incoming signal is called the noise figure. If a faint signal arriving from your coax is weaker than the internal noise of your transceiver, the signal is lost, it's lost in the hiss. And a preamp is placed as close to the antenna input as possible to boost the incoming signal so that it cleanly jumps over the receiver's internal noise floor. The catch? A preamp amplifies everything at the input.
Yeah.
The desired signal, the background band noise, nearby interfering signals. Therefore, a preamp only helps if the signal is clean, but is just too weak for your radio's internal electronics to process effectively.
Yeah, and so the guy that I worked the other day, I didn't ask him this, but he said, you're up to S9 now. Well, if he looked down below, he would see that not only did I go up 2 S units, but the noise went up 2 S units, okay? So now it may have helped him a bit with understanding my communication with him. So when do you use or engage a preamp if you have one? Well, you generally want to use a preamp when your receiver's internal noise is the primary limiting factor. Okay. In other words, the noise, as Tom said, generated in the rig. So on VHF, UHF, microwave bands, the atmospheric noise is practically non-existent. You're not going to be having all kinds of lightning out there and everything else. The main obstacle to hearing weak signals when you get on those higher frequencies, like a satellite pass or meteor scatter or distant repeater, is the noise generated by your own equipment. So there, a high quality, low noise preamp is essential. And by the way, some preamps are not high quality. The early ones that were put in a lot of rigs were not high quality. They didn't really help much at all. Now on the high bands, let's say HF 15 meters, 12 meters, 10 meters, when these bands are open, and I love it when they're open, the atmospheric noise is usually quite low. If you're hunting weak DX on 10 meters, kicking in the transceiver's internal preamp, often called like a preamp 1 or preamp 2 that throws a little more preamp in, can bring a faint signal out of the mud on the frequency at the time. Now, what about compensating for feed line loss? If you have a very long run of coax to your antenna, a mast-mounted preamp, okay, you locate it right up at the antenna, again, can be very, very helpful to amplify the signal at that point so that any signal that you lose coming through your coax is preamplified before it comes down into your shack. But again, you don't always want to use a preamp. When should we not use one, Tom?
Right. When to turn the preamp off. On the lower high frequency bands, a preamp can actually degrade your receiver's performance. On the low bands, 160 meters, 80 meters, 40 meters, and sometimes 20 meters on these bands, the atmospheric noise, the QRN, static crashes, general background RF hash are almost always much louder than your receiver's internal noise. If you turn on a preamp here, now you're just making the background noise louder along with the signal. And response to your adventure there with the 5.7 to 5.9, Quin.
Yeah.
Your signal to noise ratio does not improve at all. Everything just gets louder and more fatiguing to listen to.
Yeah, let me add, if there's a lot of lightning out there, you lose your hearing earlier in life.
and then if you're working contests or trying to break into a heavy pileup, a preamp reduces the receiver's dynamic range. If you're trying to listen to a weak signal while a big gun station is transmitting, he's 5 kilohertz away, the preamp will amplify that strong station too. And this can easily overload your receiver's front end, calling intermod distortion, splatter, ghost signals, and will entirely wipe out the weak station you're wanting to hear in the first place. So in these situations, you might actually need to turn on the attenuator, the ATT, to step the signals down to protect the receiver rather than boosting them up.
Yeah. Now, Tom, my experience has been with the 7300 and using some other SDR stuff that the SDR receivers actually can do a better job with this kind of situation than the more traditional receivers. What do you think?
Oh, I think so also. And I'm working on where I work signal modes like on digital. I very rarely turn the preamp on anyway because the SDR receivers are so sensitive to the weak signals that I find the preamp, like we had discussed, doesn't do anything but boost the background noise.
All right, let's do a little strategic summary here, Tom. As a general rule with preamps, leave them off. Look at your SWR reading, signals coming in, the background noise, how high is that noise? Don't just turn the preamp on thinking it's going to solve the problem with the amount of noise you have. It's not going to do that. In fact, here's a little tip for you. Disconnect the antenna and see how much noise you have. You may have a lot of noise coming in that isn't coming in out there through the antenna, but it's noise either in the rig itself or right around the rig that is being generated by something, sometimes even accessories that are right next to the rig. So a preamp won't help you hear anything new. It will just amplify a little bit what's already out there, also amplify the noise. If the noise level doesn't change now when you unplug that antenna connector, then you know that you got some other problems to deal with. And don't think that a preamp is really going to help you. And remember, too, to turn your preamp off when you're giving signal reports. Yeah. Because like the guy that I worked, you may be giving these phenomenal reports. You're on preamp number 2 and the guy is 10 over 9, and you turn the preamp off and he's S3 or something like that. And, and the noise level is so different. You might see our video, by the way, on S meters and the myths about S meters as well. So that's our bit on preamps. Use them, but use them wisely. This is Ham Radio Perspectives, bringing you always the truth from Dit and Duh, the Ham Radio Perspective brothers, where we chart the course out for the past, the current, and the future of ham radio, one of the most glorious hobbies in the world. I'm Quin, K8QS.
I'm Tom, WA9TDD.
See you later, everybody. A big, whopping, fat, juicy 73 to you.